Good morning, viewers. Welcome to McElroy's Motors and the third video of 2025. It is really cold here in January, and I'm wearing a Rick and Morty t-shirt. But according to the hood on my Saturn here, it has a message that I'd like to pass on to you guys. Yes, that is right. It may be just January of 2025, but I am planning on my road trip for 2025 to Washington, D.C. already. This road trip will cover roughly around 1,800 miles.
McElroy, you idiot, is going to cover 2,000 miles!
And I was supposed to do this for 2024, but because I was in the hospital most of August, I really couldn't stay in DC more than just a night. So, with that out of the way, this is what I have planned for this amazing road trip that I have planned for the first weekend of November 2025. Or perhaps the second weekend of November 2025. I don't know yet. But first things first, I gotta figure out when the Spy Museum is hosting its annual Trabot Parade, and then we can just plan things more accordingly. Despite me driving down to DC for 2024, it was not my first time going. I have driven a total of 5 separate times. I first drove to our nation's capital in this 2002 Pontiac Sunfire that I bought for $1,400 off my neighbor. If I were to show you all the modifications I would have done to this car, you might think I'm doing a crime against humanity and style. However, I do give massive props and a massive thanks to the hotel that we stayed in back in November of 2017, mainly because you have to be 21 to check in any US hotel. Me being the oldest, I was only 19. I did not take another trip to Washington, D.C. until 2021, when I took a 2012 Chrysler 200 with my 2 friends at the time. It was so nice of them to allow me to stay at the same hotel as 2017. For 2022, however, I took a 2007 Ford Focus, and I crammed not 3 people, but 4. And I will tell you more about it later, about how that vehicle did. We stayed at the same hotel in Greenbelt, Maryland. My longtime viewers may remember this 2004 Kia Optima that I had. This was the vehicle I drove down to Washington, D.C. in 2023. Now for 2024, I did drive this 1997 Saturn SL1 all the way from here in Akron, Ohio to our nation's capital about 400 miles away. And given the fact that it was just me going, and the fact that this car has relatively low mileage for its age, the car did exceptionally well, which came as no surprise. But for 2025, however, not only am I planning on taking the Saturn once again, but also I do have some concerns about taking the Saturn on this road trip. But before I unveil the concerns, allow me to give you guys a brief overview of what this road trip entails with the route that we have planned. The first leg of the journey will cover roughly 350 miles. It will be setting off from here in Akron, Ohio, and driving all the way to Easton, Pennsylvania, where I'll be meeting my friend Lucas, and we will be driving all around maybe Easton or maybe to neighboring Phillipsburg, New Jersey for lunch. It would be really cool to see my friend Lucas again, because he and I have known each other since high school, and I have not seen him for about 2 or 3 years now. The next leg of our journey will cover roughly 150 to 190 miles. And we will be going from Easton, Pennsylvania to our hotel of choice. Don't get me wrong, I loved the hotel in Greenbelt, Maryland, as well as the hotel I stayed at in Alexandria, Virginia, where I stayed in 2023 and 2024. But for 2025, I do want to try something a little bit different. Don't get me wrong, the hotels were both nice, and the hotel in Alexandria even had a hot tub in the room. But even so, I do want to try staying somewhere a little differently, now that I'm a little bit older and perhaps a little wiser, perhaps a little even stupider. That's up to you guys to decide. But either way, I do want to stay somewhere a little closer to Washington, D.C. than Greenbelt, but definitely not as expensive as the hotel I stayed at in Alexandria. Either way you look at it, we will be covering 540 to 575 miles on the first day of the road trip. Am I worried about it? Absolutely not. I think the Saturn will handle the trip just fine, and I'll explain my concerns later on. But either way, it will be a tall order for a car that's nearly 30 years old. We will be staying at a hotel of choice for 2 nights, and the reason why I say just 2 nights is because we will be leaving early Friday morning, get to the hotel of choice Friday afternoon or Friday evening, and then we will be going to the Trabant Parade at the International Spy Museum the following Saturday morning, and then after that we'll be in for another night, and then we'll be going sightseeing Sunday morning before another part of the journey. After our time in our nation's capital, we will be driving again for another 4 hours or 250 miles. We will be going from Washington, D.C. all the way to Roanoke, Virginia. And after we check in for the night, we'll be leaving first thing the next morning to pay a visit to a dealership that I've always wanted to visit, and I'm sure my other friend who was planning on going with me, being a car guy, always wanted to check out too. The dealership is in a town called Christiansburg and is called Duncan Imports. And I made a video about it, but it is the largest dealership in the country that specializes in domestic vehicles from Japan. It would be really cool to actually see these Japanese market vehicles as well as possibly test drive one. Me being a car guy, I've driven all sorts of weird cars in my lifetime, including Eagle Premier. I have owned a Trabant twice. I have driven a 1935 Auburn 851 in Auburn, Indiana. But being a car guy, I have actually never driven something right-hand drive, and I think that would be pretty darn cool. We will be in Roanoke, Virginia for just 1 night. And to my video editor, will you please stop making that bell noise? It is driving my head in.
It's me!
Oh, yeah, right. After our time in Christiansburg, we will be driving again for quite some time, by which I mean we will be driving 370 miles to Chattanooga, Tennessee, the home state of where this Saturn came from. But on the way to Chattanooga, I would like to stop at a town called Pigeon Forge, which is just outside Knoxville, because it's a bucket list place of mine. And the reason why I chose Chattanooga for our next overnight halt is because it's just north of not only my home state of Georgia, but also the land where if you spray the right amount of cologne, you might be just that little bit more attracted to your sister. In other words, Alabama. And that is a state I have not been to yet, so I would like to check that out. And then after we leave Alabama, we'll be heading straight up northwest back into Tennessee and staying at our overnight halt in Nashville. Why Nashville, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. Nashville is home to the one thing that I've always wanted to see because I love the weird, unusual cars. In other words, I will be stopping at the Lane Motor Museum, which is something I've been wanting to visit ever since I was a small lad. Okay, I am still a small lad, maybe a younger yet lad. There, I'll be a little smarter about that. But either way, that is something I've always wanted to visit, and I am so glad I'll be actually going this year. Now, of course, stopping in Pigeon Forge as well as the neighboring Gatlinburg will also give my 3 friends a chance to check out Buc-ee's. Now, if you may recall in my video that I uploaded last year, I drove down to Kentucky one time and visited Buc-ee's, mainly because I just wanted to see what all the fuss was about, and I was not disappointed. However, my 3 friends have never experienced a Buc-ee's before, so I think it would be pretty cool to actually fill up and get gas there, as well as for them to check it out and see what all the fuss is about, because when I went, it still amazes me even now just how big it was. And the one I went to in Richmond, Kentucky was apparently, according to corporate, one of their smaller stores. So I think it would be pretty cool to see one of their bigger stores too. So after we leave Nashville, Tennessee, we will be doing one more overnight halt, and that will be in Cincinnati, Ohio. And you may be asking, why not just drive all the way home? Well, as I do live in Ohio, I do know of a massive international grocery store by the name of Jungle Gyms, which I have not been to since I went down to the home of Miami University in the town called Oxford back when I was 7, 8, maybe 9. I do not know, but it's been a long time ago. Just to put it in perspective, my granddad had a 1993 Ford Mustang back then, and now he has gone through, let's see, he got rid of the Mustang. He had a 97 Chevy Blazer, a 2002 Grand Cherokee, a 2007 Grand Cherokee, and now he has a 2016 Jeep Compass. So he has had 3 vehicles since the last time we visited Jungle Gyms. And then after we leave Cincinnati, we will be making our way back home to Akron, Ohio, the starting point. So either way, why am I so nervous about taking my Saturn on such a long trip? Well, here's why. To give you guys the full understanding of why I'm a little nervous about taking this 28-year-old Saturn on a 2,000-mile road trip, allow me to give you guys a brief review of the 5 cars I took to DC the 5 separate times. Coming to the Pontiac Sunfire. The Pontiac Sunfire, though it had power windows, which were also located between the two front seats, that is by far the nicest thing I can say about it. The rear windows did not roll down at all, and the vehicle did not have air conditioning of any sort. Make things worse, the trunk was completely inaccessible from the outside, so that meant if my buddy in the back seat was trying to get snacks out, he had to fold the rear seat down, and it was not a split and folding rear seat, so he had to lean forward, fold the rear seat down, grab stuff blindly, and then put the seat back up again. It was a pain in the neck. Thankfully, though, however, it had just enough room for a passenger who was 6'6". And by just enough room, I mean his head was touching the ceiling, and when we hit a deer coming back, he had to basically smack his head on the ceiling the entire time because we had bent our rear axle. It was no fun, but that was a trip I'll never forget. I completely forgot to mention that the Pontiac also had 0 cruise control. For 2021, however, we took the Chrysler 200, and that did have a split folding rear seat, which came in handy because we hauled a 27-gallon tote filled with snacks, and it was readily accessible, and it was just perfect for it. The only criticism I had with that car, though, was its 2.4-liter four-cylinder engine, which is actually shared with my granddad's 2016 Jeep Compass. The four-cylinder engine was a little underpowered, but other than that, that's just a very minor complaint, and the car did relatively fine. The only problem was if the battery were to go, we would have to take off a tire just to access it, which made absolutely no sense at all. Now, for 2022, we took that Ford Focus, and despite it being a hatchback and the fact that I crammed 4 people plus the driver inside the car, it did relatively well. I mean, it was fun to drive, it had cruise control, heated front seats, sunroof. It was, all in all, despite it being a very small car, it was actually relatively capable of doing the road trip, and we made it there and back without any major worries. Now, for 2023, however, I took my Kia Optima, and I took my ex-fiance at the time, and as it was just the two of us, that car did just fine. It had enough space for everything, and we crammed it to the brim with souvenirs, gifts, and all that stuff, so all in all, it did just fine just for the two of us. And like I said, for 2024, I took this Saturn SL1, and as it was just me going, it was fine. But for 2025, I plan on taking myself, my friend Sean, my friends Alicia and Anthony, and so on and so forth. That's 4 people in a car with 100 horsepower. And the trunk space is not exactly huge. I mean, it's decently sized, but compared to the Pontiac Sunfire, it's tiny. And make matters worse, there's not really much in the way of luxury in this car. There's no rear door pockets, there's no rear cup holders in this car at all, there's no center console in this car, and it is just back to basics motoring, which is not such a bad thing, less stuff to break, but it's going to make for one quite claustrophobic journey, especially if we have not really much space to put the snacks. So we're thinking maybe we could put it in the front footwell, or maybe a small box in the trunk, and call it a day. But either way, we have yet to figure out how the heck we're going to cram absolutely everything in this tiny little car. But either way, it is something I am very excited about. That being said, however, plans could always change. If we decide not to take my 1997 Saturn SL1 on this amazing 2,000-mile road trip, it's not the end of the world, because we do have a 2014 or maybe a 2015 Kia Soul as backup. The Kia does have advantage of being a newer car, so therefore has more features, such as a CD player, MP3, aux, and USB capability, as well as the fact it is a newer car, so there's a better chance of it actually making it. The only downside is it has nearly double the mileage this old Saturn does, so it's basically anybody's game, and anybody's bets on which car makes it or not. But that being said, I do know this Saturn pretty well, and I would rather drive this Saturn on a long trip than a Kia because I just think it will be more fun. Besides, it's my car anyway. But I do have to sort out the front left brake caliper, and I have to wait until possibly the midpoint of February to get that done, because the shop I am planning on taking it to, the one I told you about it, who's going to replace the remaining 3 brake calipers absolutely free of charge, is completely booked until then. So either way, we do have a plan. We are starting to make plans now, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we will have some hotels booked, we will have some plans, we'll have some money set aside for this road trip, and overall, I am very, very much looking forward to this. So either way, if you would like to see more videos from McElroy's Motors, as well as some other videos that I have planned for the future, feel free to subscribe, like, comment, and let me know what you guys think about this amazing road trip that we have planned. And I'll have more videos coming along soon. Time now to go inside because it's really cold.